Hey everyone, Retire on Dividends here. Someone brought up to me the other day if I could, I guess, explain what's going on in my spreadsheets, obviously the spreadsheets that I talk about on a daily basis. So I figured I'd make a separate video to kind of dive in, to give a video out for those of you who are interested or on learning more on, what is behind each cell on the spreadsheet. Because some of you, who weren't with me in the beginning, obviously in the beginning I built it out and you saw the progress from the start. So you're probably following a little easier. But newer viewers, they're looking at this and they're probably like, what the hell? I mean, it's easy to just say, they made this, they made that. But what's the details behind it? So I figured that's what this video is about. I'm going to go through a Misty spreadsheet and just show you what essentially, every tab and every cell in the tab is. So I'll start with the synthetic. So I'm on synthetic 195 tab. And by the way, for context, although the date doesn't matter, I'm making this video on Monday, November 25th. All right. So each synthetic tab, it's named, obviously, SYN for synthetic, and then the strike price, which in this example is 195. And then within that tab, I have the date, which is the date of execution, the date of the trade, contracts, which is the number of contracts that they trade, and then trade price, which is obviously how much they pay for each trade as it involves the synthetic, which, that you can get from the intraday trades from the website. And then whether, what's a call, what's a put, which you get from the trade as well. It'll show a C or a P. And then the net, which is either a profit or a loss. So obviously for the date, that's a manual entry. I plug that in, the date, based on what's on the intraday trade. So if you go today, for example, after 4 p.m. and I download the trade and I see a trade that involves the synthetic, then I'll put it here and I'll put the date of the actual trade. Contracts, that's the same thing, that's listed on the intraday trades. So that's a manual entry as well. All right, now trade price, obviously, I would put for the call a positive value, right? Because, they're paying, it's an expense, right? So when you buy a call, which by the way, the synthetic is a buy, call, sell, put for the trade. So when they do anything, it's, they do the same amount for a call and a put. So they do a buy call and a sell put. The buy call, it's a positive number because it costs them money. The sell put, again, this is when they're adding, of course. That's a credit because when you sell something, you're getting a credit. You get money back. So in this example, under call, I do have a formula and it shows, okay, if this cell is greater than 0, then do this. And what is this? Well, you take B2, the number of contracts, and you multiply that by 100 because it's 100 shares each contract. And then you multiply that by the trade price, which in this example is $26. So the expense for that trade is 87 million, okay? So that's how I get that number. And then over here, under the put side, I have a similar formula, but I say if C2 is less than 0, then do this. So obviously in this example, in the buy call row, C2 is not less than 0. C2 is greater than 0. So that's why the call cell or the call column picks that up. But down here, C2 is less than 0. So it'll take, that value, right? It'll do B2 contracts times 100, again, 100 shares per contract, and then multiply that by C3, right? Which is, the 2435, creating a credit of $81 million. And you'll notice I always try to color code, where red positive debit, green negative credit, right? So credit. And the reason people get mad of the signage, the reason I made it the signage is because I'm kind of going how the brokerage goes. Because when you sell a put in a brokerage, it shows as a credit because you're getting a credit to your account. So that's kind of how I mimicked it. Again, and some people hate it, but I think they got used to it over time, those people. All right, so that's how you get to there. And then this is pretty simple. It's just E plus D, right? It's the 87 million plus the 0. which is the net profit. And then here, obviously, this is, it is a running total. I forgot to mention that. So if it does take, now this takes the 87 million plus D3 plus E3. So now it shows you, the total value of that total trade actually is 5.5 million expense. And that's a running total. So it does that, along the lines. So when I have a negative, like the next one down, negative 3,000 contracts, that means they had to sell these contracts, right? So the trade price I use, same signage and everything, right? But you'll notice, since it does take contracts into the formula, it takes, since 3,000 is negative, it's going to flip the signage of the call. And in this example, the call is actually making you money because you're selling it. And before you were buying it, that's an expense. But now you're selling it because you're closing out the position. So you'll get a credit for that. And then the reverse, think of the put, right? You sold the put already. If you're closing the put, you have to buy it back. So when you buy it back, that's why it's showing a debit red, right? So that's basically it. Nothing, too complex about that, but, the formulas are within. They do all the work. I do manual entry on column A, column B, and column C. Everything else is formulated. Obviously, I have to make sure the formulas are correct. I do have to make sure I do highlight. I know these are Christmas colors, but Christmas is coming. But I do highlight them. I try to highlight them red or green. And down on the bottom, you always see the green, right? What the green is, this totals the sum of all the contracts. And I have a negative in front because by the time we get to the green, that's the closeout. This is the closeout of the synthetic. So the negative value of the sum of every contract, that should be the closeout. If it's not, then there's something wrong with my formula. So if I get to here and then they're closing out everything, this is automatically filled in. So 31,130, that should have been the trade. If they closed out 2,000, then obviously that's not the closeout. That's just another trade. Because you see the one above, they closed out 2,500, right? So obviously that's not the closeout. The green is the final number closeout. So that's why I do have the formula. I'm not just entering a number. I do want to make sure it is the total sum of the contracts. But same thing across for the green, everything, no change. Everything else is the same. It's just green because it's the last trade. The only difference is obviously to the right here, I do add this little thing just to show you how much it costs to close out the synthetic position when all said and done, right? It takes the 214 credit in D14 and then adds adds E15, which is how much buy to close the put. And it shows you, okay, this is how much we made on that synthetic trade. But overall, the 201, that's the total, right? That's how much in the end they made for that synthetic position overall. Now, under the synthetic, right, you have this little black box, right? So all this is, it shows you MSTR, which is the underlying, and then strike. So MSTR, this is a formula. It's a Google Finance formula. It just grabs A17, which is the ticker, and then it, gets you the price, right? And that's it. It's a formula. That updates every day. I don't have to do anything. Opening my water, getting thirsty already. That's automatic, right? The strike, that's a one-time entry on the synthetic tab. Obviously, when they create a new synthetic, I create a new tab. So this is only changed once. So that's pretty easy for me. And then this date, again, one change, the date of the expiration. That's pretty easy as well. Now, for this value, this is pretty simple as well. This is where I take B17, which is MSTR price, subtract it by the strike, 195, right? And then I divide it by B18, which is the strike. So it shows you how much above the underlying is above the strike. This is an older synthetic, though. Just keep that in mind. We don't have an actual synthetic that's 116% above. And then you have the days till expiration, which, I'll go to a more current synthetic, but this shows -9 because obviously we're past that date. And then this is something I added because I used to get too detailed about the synthetic, and this reminds me, at what point I should talk about the synthetic, right? So I do, what is it? I don't even remember what I wrote here. Okay, as we get closer by date, if we're 14 days away if we're less than 14 days away, we should talk about it. If not, we should probably leave it alone. So it's kind of a reminder for myself. And then I do add the earnings note. That's just a note down below. And then there's 2 sections here, September profits. That's obviously when we were tracking this monthly. That's how much that went into the month of September. And now we're on the 4-week cycle. So this first 4-week cycle, that added, that much in there. So it started on D12 essentially, right? D12, and it picked up down to 15, you see, okay? Everything else up to 11 was picked up for September. So that's pretty much the synthetic. And here's the open synthetic as we speak, right? So you see, obviously, total contracts should be 28,220, right? Because that's how many they added in. And this is my double check. I need this to compare to the holdings information, right? On the last page, on the holdings tab, right? So, and then obviously, you can see here, all right? So the current one is actually 33% above, as of now at least. So that shows in a good position. If this was a negative, we'd be below the strike price, which is not good, right? Because the synthetic position, you want it in a positive spot, right? You want the buy call to be making money, right? And you want the sell put to expire worthless. So that, you have a better chance of that to happen if the underlying price is above the the strike. So you can see here, it says leave the synthetic alone because 89 days, obviously greater than 14. So obviously it tells you don't talk about the synthetic. And then here, payment 1 grabs up to E13, and then payment 2 is picking up as of D14, which these dates this is all manual, unfortunately, as well. So that is something I do have to add because these cells down here, this is where the payment information pulls from, right? When I put that synthetic information on the payment tab, it has to pull from here, right? So you can see, all right, it's pulling from, this tab, this cell, it's adding in, it's automated at that point, but still I have to calculate what, part of it should pull, which, it's a lot of work. A lot of this spreadsheet is a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, but some of it I did make as automated as possible without losing, too much touch, because I do like to touch it. Now, this is probably the most complicated tab of the spreadsheet, so I'll try not to spend too much time on this, but I'll do my best here. So on the blue, that's kind of like the header. That's like the total, that's the breakdown, that's like the ticker, right? The ticker that always goes across the screen. So we'll go, we'll cover that first. So what does it cover? Well, A1 is obviously the ticker of, the YieldMax fund we're covering, which in this example is Misty. And then this is just the current price of Misty. So that's, those are there for me because when I update the end of day numbers, that's what I use. And then you have the underlying ticker and then the underlying price, formula. So, nothing complicated there. 30-day IV, that's just, this is a formula as well. People always ask me what's the formula. This is the one I use. It pulls from alphaquery.com. And then obviously it's pulling from cell D1. Cell D1 is MSTR. It's not getting me the IV of Misty. It's getting me the IV of the underlying of Misty, which is MSTR. And it takes, you can see the 30-day implied volatility, okay? And then obviously it's very high. It's 222%. Outstanding shares, this is a formula that pulls from the holdings tab. So if I go to the holdings tab real quick, you could see K3 is always going to be outstanding shares. And this updates every day, the holdings updates. So I'm comfortable with that, pulling from that cell. So yes, that is automated. Income, this is, again, it pulls from a cell. So right now you can see it pulls from Y1004. Now I do have, I made payment 1, payment 2. So each 4-week cycle now, I'm going to have 13, right? 13 of these going across because there's now 13 cycles within a fiscal period, right? I'm trying to start the payment dates within the fiscal period, not the calendar year, the fiscal year. Because to see like do we think there's a massive remaining amount to be paid out at the end of the year? Because again, they have to pay out 90% of their income. So this right now, this captures the subtotal of payment 2, which is Y1000 something. I'm not going to scroll all the way down. Number one, it'll take too long. And number two, you'll get dizzy. So that's where it pulls, though. It pulls the subtotal of that current 4-week cycle, all right? And that's where the income comes from. And if it's a debit, which it is, we're not making income. We're losing money, right? If it's a credit, that's actual income, okay? Now, distribution is pretty simple. It takes the total income and it divides it by the outstanding shares. So that shows where we stand as far as the weekly trades are, how much income we made per share. And typically that amount goes into the payment tab, right? If you go to the payment tab, see this 262? That pulls from the other tab, right? So, actually, no, this is a formula here, which should match obviously to the income. It's doing the same thing essentially. All right, so daily income, what does that do? I mean, that's pretty simple. It takes the total income under Q1 and it divides by the number of days that we've been trading so far. And since we just started trading this Misty cycle, it's 4 days. And this is manual entry. So every day I touch the spreadsheet, I add a day. So when I'm done, when today closes 4:30 p.m., 4 p.m., I'll update the prices and then I'll update this. I'll add 1 and make it 5, right? Over the weekend, I added 2. Yes, I do count weekends. And then there's daily yield. What is daily yield? I mean, it's pretty simple. You take the daily income and you divide it by, B1? B1. So S1, let me just double check. So daily income divided by Misty price. So basically, since they're making negative income divided by that price, it shows how much the daily yield is. Yeah. So since it's in the negative, it doesn't really matter. But if this was a positive, it would be, showing we're making 1%, 1.83% per day. And then annualize that, you just take the daily yield and you multiply that by 365%. All right? Simple enough. That's all formulated. And then if you get below the blue, then you got the black columns. A lot going on here. I know it's a little maybe hard to tell. Let me zoom in if it helps. So activity date, we kind of want the headers though. There you go. Activity date, that's just the date of the trade. So I'll update, the value of the ETF close price and the underlying close price each and every day and how much it went up or down, right? Those are the next 4 cells across. But each activity date, every day is going to have at least one day, unless it's the weekend, at least one row to show that the change in the price, okay? Now, if there's multiple trades within the day, like you see 1018, there's 4 rows because they had 4 different trades. So it's going to be repetitive. So I'll show the same price over and over and over. But again, that day had 4 trades. So that's how I have to reflect it, okay? And then obviously, yes, the gains, it'll show, that's automatic. That'll fill in based on what I put. So moving on from that, that's pretty self-explanatory. Then there's the trades. So expiration date, that's the first field I fill in. That's the expiration date of the trades. And then there's the number of contracts for the trade in this example. You know what? Let me go to a white one because anything in gray is previously covered. I'll go to a more current trade. So in this example, 12/6 expiration, 790 contracts. And then this is how much they paid. This is how much they made per share for that trade. $24.50 credit for selling the call. The strike price is here. Again, close price is blank until they close out the position. And they will close out the position. So there's going to be a value here at some point. All right. Now, the strike price shows 720. Okay, that's an important number. Now, what's the break even? Well, the break even shows you how much basically, assuming they go all the way up until Friday at the end of the closing period, what price can MSTR be without them losing money? This is the break even, right? So you want to stay below the break even. Anything above the break even, again, as of the Friday, we're talking about, because assuming all time value expires, if they close it out early, all things are out the window because there's a lot of time value in the premium. But, considering that they let it expire for the Friday of 12/6, 744.50, you want to be below that, right? You want to be below that. Anything above that, we're losing money because we'd have to pay more than 24.50 to close it. Anything at or below, you're paying 24.50 or less. Hopefully that makes sense. The break even, I don't talk about it a lot because, again, I'm not here to break even. So I always say, we strive to be below the strike price. All right, the next value is the percent out of the money. Now, this is the percent out of the money as of the trade, okay? So what does it do? It does if J67 equals 0, then 0, right? So if there's no strike on that cell, then nothing goes in that field. However, if there is a value, then we do J67, strike price, minus D67, which is the value of the underlying on that date, and then you divide it by the value of the underlying on that date. And it shows you how much the strike price is above or below, that current price, that daily price. So the as of the day of the trade, they were 51% out of the money. All right. Now there's the as at, which is more important. This is where we stand as of now. So again, if J67 is 0, this is 0. All right. If there's no strike, then this cell is 0. If J67 is not 0, then we do J67 minus, you see the E1 with the dollar signs. That means, why do you use the dollar signs? Well, when I copy it down, the dollar signs keep it locked in. So if I copy this down, you can see E1 stays consistent. So anyway, we take the strike price and we subtract it from the current price of MSTR, which is E1 at the top. We saw that. That's a Google Finance formula. And then you divide it by the current price. And it shows you this is the as at percentage out of the money. So when I go into my spreadsheet every morning and I tell you this is where we stand, it's always the as at percent out of the money. Column L is important because that's the day of the trade, right? But the day of the trade, when I'm covering it, that value and the as at are the same, but then the as at will change over time, as the price of the underlying changes. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So next cell over is yield. This basically just calculates the yield of the trade, right? So let's see, what are we dealing with here? So we got S67. Where is that at? Oh, sorry, we're jumping ahead here. S67, which is the profit, which we'll get into that calc in a second, divided by basically, how much we paid. All right, so how much did we pay? They have D67. Okay, so D67, that's the price of the underlying on that day. So multiply that times 100 for 100 contracts, right? And then multiply that by the number of contracts, G67, right? So if you divide the call credit divided by how much, basically they had to pay for that trade, or, the value of that trade, that's what the yield is, right? That's how much they got, for that trade. So again, hopefully that made sense, but that's the yield, that's essential return on investment, and that's it. It doesn't matter how many days, it's just calculating how much they returned, versus how much they spent, all right? So they made, 1.9 million call credit that day, and based on how much they spent, that yielded 5.17%. Now, what is daily yield? Daily yield takes that 5.17%, and what does it do? It divides it by the number of days. Pretty simple, right? And what's the number of days? Well, it's the expiration date, F67, minus A67, which was the original activity day. So in that example, it's 12/6 minus 11/20. All right. So on the daily yield is 0.32%. Why do we get the daily yield? It's so we can get the annualized yield. The annualized yield is 117% because we take the daily yield and we multiply it by 365 days. If the trade is made and expires in the same week, technically I should be multiplying it by 252 for the number of trading days. I only count weekends if they're trading over the weekend. Sometimes I forget to do that, so keep that in mind, but this is what I should be doing. Again, okay? All right, so how does the call credit get calculated? I mean, that's pretty simple. It takes H67, which is what? That's the open price, right? That's the credit that they got for selling that call. So you get that credit, you multiply it by G67, which is the number of contracts. Since it's 100 shares per contract, you multiply the number of contracts times 100, all right? So that is the total credit you get for that trade. Same thing with the call debit. It does the same exact thing, except it multiplies it by the close price, okay? And then profit loss, it just adds the two together. And then win loss, it basically says, it only fills in when there's an actual value on I-67, which is close price. So as I said, every trade has to have a close price when all said and done. So when they do, it'll calculate whether or not it's a win or a loss. If the value of the profit loss column in column S is a negative, it's a win. If the value of the profit loss column is a debit, a positive value, it's a loss. So that's automatic. All right. Hopefully everyone's still following. I know this is a lot of information. And again, I'm doing my best to make it fast, but not too fast. Outstanding shares, this is manual entry. It's pretty simple. I pull the outstanding shares from here. It's right on the top, so it's always updated. I fill that in, and then I copy this formula. It basically, it calculates the change from the day prior, and then the change percentage, it's kind of straightforward. It takes the change number, divides it by the day prior to how much it goes up. But again, that information, not that complicated, but yes, it is manual entry, more formulated to the right, the cells to the right. All right. So that is pretty much my weeklies tab. And it goes on and on and on. Well, the new format is this goes for the full fiscal year, because as you can see, I have all 4-week cycles. They're all going to be here, right? So this spreadsheet is going to go on from 11/1/2024 to 10/31/25. And that's the plan. And that way, the reason for that is I'd like to use this spreadsheet to provide you end of year data, to give you some information, how they did, wins and losses, the average percent out of the money, things like that. And of course, anything in gray, it's what I covered in the previous day. Anything in white is what's currently open. But you can see if there's no close price, then it's still open. All right. And then obviously anything down here, it's not filled in yet. We didn't get that far, but I'll update that as we go, right? It's a big, long journey, right? Payment 1, the 4-week cycle ended there. Unfortunately, like some cycles have open trades there, so I have to kind of split. So here's where payment 1, I only picked up the call credit, right? And then here I picked up the debit. The closeout went into the next cycle, all right? So that's just how it worked out. All right, so that's the weekly tab. Reaction tab is rather simple. Obviously, there's an image field where I just, well, it's not an image field, but it's just a blank cell where I include the image. Here is where I just include what group that the ETF is from, right? And then down here, I put the next declaration date. And then here, what do? I take that next declaration date and I subtract it by today, and it'll give you a number, right? And that's the number of days until the next declaration date. All right, payment information. This, it looks complicated, but it's not. Again, we showed you where we calculate the synthetic income, right? So it pulls from the appropriate synthetic income cells, and then short call income, it pulls from the weeklies, right? And this example was X, right? That was payment 1 column. And then the next one down is payment Y column, right? And then net income is just the addition of the two cells right there. Shares, this is locked in. You see no formula here because that's locked in. That's the X date number of outstanding shares, because I want to keep that locked in to show you how much was actually paid out based on the number of shareholders, right? Again, I'm trying to use actual data to my best ability. And then down here on the active, this is the active payment cycle. We're on number 2. And you can see it's formulated. So it pulls directly from the weeklies. And I'll change that and I'll lock in the X date number when we get to that point. But right now, this is open. So income per share, that's pretty simple. It's D2 divided by E2. D2 total income, E2 the number of outstanding shares. So obviously the first column shows you, if it's a negative number, that's a good thing because negative net income shows that they made a credit. If it's a debit, obviously it shows that they're losing money per share. And then short call income per share, it's pretty simple. It just takes the short call income, which, that's from the weeklies, and it shows you how much they're making on the weeklies. And I pull that separately. Why? Because I use that number down here when I use the Rodimeter, right? So I use the Rodimeter in order to calculate, how much we're making on the weeklies. And then I multiply how much we're making on the weeklies on a daily basis versus how many days are left. But this number has to be a negative for it to work. And it hasn't been a negative in a while because they haven't been making money on the weeklies. Wins, losses, this can get a little complex, but I'm pulling up the wins and losses from the payment cycles, from the trades that ended within each payment cycle. So we had 14 wins, 28 losses on the first 4-week payment cycle. And then this one, this is an active payment cycle. Right now, I'll have to cut it off at some point, but it's adding those columns, the number of wins and the number of losses of each column, but I'll end it when we get to the bottom until we get to, number 3, right? The third 4-week cycle. So that's a little manual. That's a little annoying, but you guys did ask for this, so I did add it. So there you go. You're welcome. All right, distro per share. This is what gets calculated at the end of each calculation. I'm sorry. Well, it gets added at the end of each cycle, right? They declare what they're paying. So they paid $4.42 in the last, the first 4-week cycle. Total distro, this is how much they paid. So I take the total distribution per share, J2, and I multiply it by E2. And this is why I lock in E2, right? That number's locked in. So it'll always show you this is actually this is what I'm showing, that how much they had to pay out. And I use that in order to calculate whether or not there's a debit or credit carried forward. So you could see here, it does if D2 plus K2 is less than 0, right? D2, where is it? D2 plus K2 is less than 0, then D2 plus K2, right? So in this example, D2 plus K2 is less than 0, right? Because it created an overall credit. We took that credit and we added it there. So they had a $60 million credit left over. And then obviously the reverse, if it's a positive, then they'll add that debit carried forward over. So again, hopefully that makes sense. The reason I'm doing that is I could see how much money was left over, right? And then, you can see under the next row, this is still open. So there's no distro per share. There's no total distro. This gets added at the end of each payment cycle. And then, like I said, we have 13 cycles. So all this will be filled in when all said and done. And it shows you here. I also have a note, the fiscal year starts 11/1 and ends 10/31. But yeah, just some information. This is like the end all be all. This is the mother load, this is what matters, the payment tab. So yeah, like I said, the Rodimeter, it's really used for the weeklies, but I do have backup here. This pulls the IV that's from the weeklies tab, which obviously, yes, it's very high. And what does this do? This takes that IV, essentially, it takes the price of Misty, multiplies it by that IV, and divides it by, why is it doing 12? There's 13 freaking payments. See, I just found a screw up. There you go. Divide by 13. I don't know why. I thought I updated that. But either way, there used to be 12. Obviously, there was monthly payments. Now there's every 4 weeks. So when we do every 4 weeks, there's an extra payment in the year, making it 13. So obviously, that's the estimate based on the IV. Holdings, this is rather simple. If I click under A2, you'll see this is actually formulated. So at the end of today, sometime around 8 p.m., you'll see that this changes from 11/25. It'll show today's date, which today, as I'm making this video, what is it? The 25th. Oh, no, not today. It'll show tomorrow's date. I'm sorry. It'll show the 26th at the end of the day, and that's when the holdings are updated. Until then, it'll just show you this, because these are the holdings, the as-at holdings. Down here, I never talk about, but this will show you the intraday trades, for the day. But I never use it because it goes away. Like the next morning, it'll go away. It's only there until, it posts after like 4:30 p.m., but then it's gone at midnight. So there's really no point, because I record these videos in the morning and they're gone in the mornings. And then outside of that, again, all of this is formulated. Anything up to row 15, that's all formulated, right? So the holding information is pretty self-explanatory. It's the as at date, it's the ticker, right? And then it shows like under, what each thing is, right? If there's a really long ticker, that's the call, right? Or the put. And then if there's like numbers, that's kind of like the treasuries. It'll show you like under security name, treasuries, or, and then it'll show you the underlying and call and whatnot. And then cash, of course. And then it shows you, outstanding shares. Obviously, that's number of contracts in most instances. And then it shows you the price. That's the current value of each trade. And then the market value. So that's the current market value of, of every single transaction. So you see the put is negative because that's how much we have to pay. Like I said, we have to close out the put at some point. So we have to pay something. Right now, it costs us $222 million, which is not a big deal because the buy call is worth $532 million in orange, right? Everything else in between, again, that just adds up into what we call the assets under management, which is the 1.2 billion number. And then there's weighting. So what percent of each, each item and what percent of that it makes up the fund. The net assets, that's, obviously that should match my number down here. Let me double check it. 268,383. It's actually off a little. Whatever, it's close enough. Outstanding shares, 35.6 mil. Creation units, who cares? And then money market flag, who cares? But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Obviously, to calculate the NAV in green, I take the net asset value divided by, the outstanding shares, and then this is the Google trade price, and it shows you the comparison. But I'll have to look at this again, compare it to what we showed there. I don't know how it could be different, but whatever, man. Like we said, sometimes it's a little off. This is all manual, so I add up how much the value of the synthetic is and how much it would cost to close the weeklies, and it just shows you between the two. If it's a positive, they're in a good spot, right? So, and that's pretty much it for the holdings. Again, there's not much, holdings is its own little video in itself, but I'm here to talk about my spreadsheet, not necessarily what the holdings represent, but I think you guys know that. And then there's the earnings 5, which every quarter I'll cover the 5 most important or most exciting things, at least in my eyes, that happened from each earnings call. So for Misty, we've only been through 2. As you can see, this is the newly added item here. So I think it's fun. I think it's good, good information. But yeah, that's it. So that's the whole spreadsheet. So the only time I have to add new tabs is the synthetic. And I will probably hide these synthetics as we go on, just to not make this too much. Again, I don't want to be scrolling through tabs like I was before. But yeah, so each ETF has a spreadsheet, and it's going to have a spreadsheet per year. So you can see if I go back, this is named Misty 2025 because this is for the fiscal year 2025, right? It ends in fiscal year 2025. So I'll have one for each fund for each year, assuming I'm doing this and continue to cover this. We don't know what's going to happen this year. There could be another competitor to YieldMax that's better, right? And maybe I'll cover them. But for right now, this is what I'm doing. But hopefully this was a good explanation. I will put this video on under the details of each daily video so that people can access it, going forward, because a lot of people do ask me to make a separate video explaining about the spreadsheet. And hopefully I did this justice. If I did not, please let me know. As always, none of this is financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. This video is for fun and entertainment. So hopefully you had fun. Hopefully you're entertained. If not, what can I say? I don't know. I'll do another one at another point because, again, my spreadsheet changes frequently. I hate doing these videos just because my spreadsheet changes a lot. It's been a while, though. Like, my spreadsheet, this has been around for a while, so the likelihood that I change things drastically, probably not going to be the case. But, again, we'll see. Maybe I'll make an update every 6 months to a year. But right now, this is the update. Hopefully it helped. If it did not, let me know if you have any questions, and I will answer them below. If it's an important question, then obviously I could pin that one in case other people should see it. If you enjoy this content, please hit the like button, and I greatly appreciate that. Like I said, questions down below. All right, that's all I got for today. I'm done yapping. Hopefully this wasn't too long and painful, and hopefully you enjoyed it. All right, take care. Thank you for watching. Later.